start, I just want to make sure that you understand that, one, I never fought a day in my life, so I can only do one thing, is salute this gentleman and thank him for coming to liberate me. I was born, now you're going to say, wait a minute, with an accent like yours, where are you coming from? Will you believe it? I was born an American citizen and only spoke English like you until age 8. And then we were taken prisoner by the Germans. They put a German guard in the house. They took Dad and sent him to concentration camp because he was an American from Chicago, Illinois. And then the guard took all our English books away. And in Belgium, by law, you have to learn Dutch and French. So I learned Dutch and French, and I know French better than I know English. But in the process, I got a Dutch accent, and many people think I'm German. And you want to get me nervous, you call me a German. Very special love for the German. My father was the only American citizen condemned to death by the Germans for helping American airmen escape out of Belgium during World War II. And he himself escaped thanks to this gentleman, but his big boss, General Patton, who came through Belgium at such a high rate of speed, they caught up with a train going to Germany and liberated the 1,500 Belgians that were all condemned to death and one American, my dad. So, now, that being said, you know a little bit about me, the shell. During the battle, we had a battery of British ACAC, they call them, anti-aircraft artillery. These are 3.5 inch gun, and the battery was on the property, right next to the house. So my mother at the time said, look, it's muddy outside, you're running 2 shifts, put 1 shift in our house. And so they rotated, and we had 60 men at all time in the house. So that's one of the shells that was given to us children. By the way, I'm the oldest of nine children. 2 of my baby brothers finishing that little school in Cambridge that nobody has ever heard of, called MIT. And both of them Captain U.S. Air Force, 1 jet fighter pilot. And number 9, I'm the oldest, 9 of the 9. He finished U.S. ambassador to Madagascar and second in command of the CIA in Africa. So the flag, Mrs. Terrier, would you help me open up that flag? Those of you who have seen the flag before, I would ask you not to betray them. Okay, now we had a German guard in the house, but my mother, who was a Belgian, knew that she wanted to make sure that her little 9 children would have an American flag flying on the house when we were going to be liberated. So the German guard was an older man, not nasty, and he would snore. So when mother heard him snore, she knew she could work on the flag, but she never told us, of course, it was a secret. And then she put it underneath the floor, she had lifted the board in the bedroom, and she hid the floor, the flag underneath the floor. So now, she knew there were 13 stripes. She knew there were 48 stars, because Hawaii and Alaska were not yet states. But what is wrong with this flag? Yes, you know about it. You know about it. And tell me, look, focus on a star. Any star. Focus on any star. And what is wrong with that flag? Anybody? Come on.
They're upside down.
They're upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, baby. You're right. They're pointing in the wrong direction. Mother did not know that the flag, the star should be pointing up. So this is the only American flag that I can tell you a funny story about it. Now, we did not know this, of course. And all of a sudden, she comes back on bicycle on September 3rd. It was warm, and she said, Chris, the Americans are coming. The Americans are coming. Go in my room, move that little piece of furniture. You'll find a loose board. You'll find an American flag. Put it up. Oh, you imagine this little shrimp. I was so proud. I didn't even know English anymore because we were forbidden to speak English, but that's okay. So I went and I put up the flag. Within an hour, I say that an hour, could have been more or less, but she comes back and she's really perspiring on bicycle. And she said, Chris, take the flag down, take the flag down. There are 3 German tanks coming up the street. If a German had ever seen this flag up there, I can guarantee the house is gone.
Yes.
So, and I can promise you, I never folded the flag. I rolled it in a little ball. I went downstairs and underneath the floor it went, whew, I made it. The tail of the flag.
That's a great.
I'm going to give that to you. You must understand that as an American, I don't like to be called a Democrat or a Republican. I'm an American. And that politics don't mean anything to me. So I begged, literally, worked my way to be in France. So now I land in a job as a military policeman, and of course I did not know that there was a special term for the police. So I'm aboard ship now, and the major is going to interview us. And as soon as I opened my mouth, he said, you're not an American. I pulled my passport. What if you were born in America? I'm not a lawyer. So he scratched the orders of the general and sent me to Germany, infantry. Coming out of there, I thought nothing I can do, salute. Coming out of there, there's a low-level corporal now. Grabbed me by the shoulder, and he says, soldier, you've been treated like by the major. I said, what can I do? I have a list of all the jobs in France, needed in France. You know how to fly a Piper Cup? No, sir. You know how to type? No, sir. I mean, finally he looks at me in despair and he says, you know nothing. I said, well, I have a problem. Would you mind, and I know there are many ladies in the room and I should not, it doesn't mean anything if I don't use his term, otherwise it's not funny. And he looks at me with a big smile and he says, would you mind going to a chicken shit outfit? Ladies and gentlemen, I had never heard the word, so I responded to him, in all honesty. I said, I did not know that the American army had chickens. You should have seen his face. He looked at me with a big smile, he said, you are pulling my leg, of course. I said, no, sir. In order to get chicken shit, you need chickens, right? And he looked at me and said, so you're not joking? I said, no. Well, if the MPs, of course. I said, well, I'll take the MPs. So I landed in an MP unit in Orléans, France. And because I knew French better than I knew English, of course, I was once in a while called to go to the NATO to translate between generals. And that automatically forced me to get secret clearance. Now, a low level private doesn't get to but I was required. Okay, that's one thing. Then I was assigned to any crime, murder, suicide. That was my job. And then, of course, I was responsible to communicate with the French. So now, the first time, everything went fine. the French are always favoring the French, of course. And I let him go, and then came to the French gendarme and said, "Gendarme, I'd like to compare notes." And he looked at me. "Vous parlez français? You French, speak French?" I said, "Yeah." Well, now he's in trouble because his write-up was totally false. But from one thing to another, I did well. And I was able to, like I think I told you, my fiancée was in Belgium, and I got the permission to marry. And now I am one day in full uniform, and my wife on my arm, time off, and this lady comes and looks at me and goes like that. That means shame on you. And I looked at the lady and I said, "Madame, avez-vous des problèmes avec mon épouse? Lady, do you have a problem with my spouse?" And she looks at me with horror. "Vous parlez français? You speak French?" I said, "That's not my point. My point is what's the problem with my spouse?" And of course she thought my spouse was a lady of the night. She ran away. Okay? So now, my wife did not know one word of English when we married. And her sister, she came from Belgium, and she did not know a word of English. But in the center of Orly, France, there's a big statue similar to the Paul Revere here in Boston. But except there's no Paul Revere, it's Joan of Arc. And Joan of Arc, we very impolitely, soldiers, when we refer to that area, we went to Johnny on the pony. That was not very nice, but that was between us. So now, I said to my wife Jane and to Margaret, her sister, "I'm going to put my uniform on, and we're going to go to Johnny on the pony, and I guarantee there's be an American Chevrolet. They're all black, always, and they have a special license plate. And he will slow down, and he will shout, 'Buddy, you want to share?' Thinking that I had two ladies of the night. And my sister-in-law and my wife said, 'You are pulling our leg, aren't you?' No, I said, okay. So we went, and it didn't take 45 degrees. Guy slows down, window open. 'Hey, buddy, you want to share?' I said, 'Yeah, sure. Which one do you want, my wife or my sister-in-law?' Boom, gone. The experience that some soldiers have, that like I told you, I never fought, but I had some funny experiences. Now I have to tell you another true story that is much more, that you will really enjoy. At the end of the war, I hope I didn't have to tell you that story. Mother comes back and says, "The Americans are coming, the Americans are coming." So, did I tell you that story?
No.
Okay. And so the three oldest, I'm the oldest of 9, the three oldest, we begged Mother to go and see the Americans. And so she said, "Okay, get on your bicycle." And we went about 4 miles to a little town now. We were in a village. And we get to the end of one of the main streets, and we saw it. We were in the combat zone. There were German SS dead here. There was a British tank coming down from the Brussels area, and all of a sudden, boom! The German tank got him and literally destroyed the poor guy and killed people. So Mother took us around, and we went to the other side of the town. And now we wait, and the Belgians are there with their Belgian flag and American flags, and we're waiting, and all of a sudden, 2 Harleys showed up. The 2 first Americans that we ever saw. And Mother was raised and educated in England, so she was about the only Belgian who knew English, and of course, having married an American, they always spoke English. And she approached, and she said to us in French now, so that the poor guy would not understand, "They are drunk." We understood. And then she said in English, "Fellows, when did you have something to eat last?" And the 2 guys looked at her, one of them especially, "Lady, what is that eat? The Belgians are so happy to see us. the only thing they give us is liquor, wine, beer. We never get anything to eat. Where would we get something to eat? And mother said, at my home. Now, she knows they're under a problem, right? And he goes, I can still see him. Upon maybe Harley Davidson during the war, there is no seat there. This is a piece of metal, right? She takes her bicycle. Here, Chris, take my bicycle. And she jumped on the motorcycle. And my sister Pest, we call her Pest for good reason, I guess. And she died being Pest too. But she took her bicycle and gave it to my sister Pop. And why did we call her Pop? Because she was ruddy face and we always called her Poppy. And here Pop and Miriam Pest jumped on the other motorcycle and boom, they're gone. And so now we have 2 bicycles each and we get back home. And they were sitting down, mother was giving them a meal, no liquor, no wine, no beer, just water. And that was an experience that I can tell you, there's only 2 women that ever rode a motorcycle in the combat zone. So one of my funny experiences. I could go on like that for hours. Should I tell them about Earl Adams?
The medal, yes.
Okay, we have a local
Yeah.
hero like this gentleman in Worcester called Herbert Adams, paratrooper. And now the Germans hated to fight during night. It was disliked. And this night, the Americans are in the woods here, there's a field, and the Germans are there. They push, and of course the Americans beat them. And so now, Herb Adams and his buddy, after the battle settled down, said, well, maybe we could go and get a souvenir. So they picked off in the field, and they, maybe a medal or something. And there was 3 Germans dead, quote unquote. And Herb Adams, who was a very gentle paratrooper, but he was a gentleman, he said to me, I don't know why I did that, Chris, but I kicked one. And I said, get up, you son of a bitch. And the 3 of them got up with their hands up in the air. If you ever see, but he spoke English. Wait a minute. And he spoke like a fellow from Chicago. And then he looked at me and he said, you are 82nd Airborne. And we always in combat, we removed all our signs on our uniform. How do you know that? Well, my twin brother is in your unit. And Herbert said, yeah, you're pulling my leg this time. No, what's the name of your twin brother? And he gave me a name. Now, in the infantry, a platoon consists of 4 squads of 9 men. Would you believe that his twin brother was in Herb Adams' squad? And Herb said, oh my goodness, then he looked. He said, yeah, they look alike. He said, wait a minute, explain this one to me. Well, it's very simple. My father and mother emigrated to Germany, from Germany to the States. They went to Chicago. We were born in Chicago. We went to high school. And after many, many years, as you can see, my father said, I'd like to go back to the fatherland and meet the family. And asked my mother said, oh no, I'm not going back. And my brother said, and I'm staying with mother. And I stupidly said, I'm going with you, Dad. And by the time they got to Germany, they were arrested by the Germans. The father was sent to the Russian front and he was sent to the other side. So now you imagine in the millions, Herb Adams kicked a fellow whose twin brother was in Herb Adams. Herb Adams kicked the German and his twin was in Herb Adams' squad of 9 men. So the lieutenant called the American paratrooper and said, you take those prisoners back to the battle. so you can be with your brother for an hour or so. So the two brothers, and they all came out alive. Track with them, they all came out alive. So, unusual. Any question that you?
Yeah, tell them remember when the Germans occupied your home in Belgium when you were younger?
Yeah.
Tell them a few stories about that, how they'd stay there and guard your house, and they also, your father built out in the woods a shelter for you kids to go hide. Tell us about the shelter in the woods and how the Germans occupied your house and they slept in your house.
Being Americans, Dad being an American, and we were all born in Belgium but registered at the US Embassy. So at the embassy, actually we did not know that of course, but never issues a birth certificate, only passport. So my first passport, and I still have it by the way, is dated January 24, 1928, my birthday. So I have a passport issued on the date of my birthday. But the Germans took over when Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 41. The Japanese never said that they were going to attack. The Germans, Hitler, 3 days later, on the 11th of December, declared war on the US. And that was automatic. Then we were enemy number one. They took that and they sent them to concentration camp. Then we had the German guards in the house and forbidden to speak English. But during the war, before he left, he had built a shelter in the little slope in the house. And so now the British bombed a railroad crossing not far away from us, but they made a terrible mistake. They came with what they call mosquito planes. Mosquito was made out of strictly plywood. The only thing that they could see on the radar, the German radar, was the engine and the machine gun. Otherwise, the rest was all plywood. And they put flares over the railroad station. They forgot that the wind was blowing, and the wind blew over Limlet, a little village. And the first wave of British planes, bombers, they flattened Limlet. The second wave flattened Limal. And the third wave, luckily, there were fields. And the last bomb fell about only 600 yards away from our shelter, but we could feel it, of course. But the Germans were literally keeping track of us. They were continually harassing us. So this was the dangerous one. See, in the German army, you had two types of soldiers. The one in green uniform, that was the regular army, Wehrmacht. Then the one in black uniform was the SS. Those were the special guards to Hitler. And they were routers. I mean, they would kill just for fun. And so they would come around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, who knows, in the morning, pull us all out of bed, and then they would check to see the number of warm beds. And then they would come down in the room where they had all gathered us and check to see it. And my dad and mother were hiding a little Jewish fellow, but of course we did not know it. That was secret, otherwise it would have been automatic shooting them. So the little Jewish fellow was 2 years younger than us, and he was coming from Brussels. And Eddie Bremeyer was just hungry in Belgium, so they brought us to the country. But he had his own bed. So the Germans, we were 9, that we were 10, they never saw the difference. So he was never harassed. Well, he was harassed, but it was never caught as a Jewish fellow. And the question, he was always the same thing. Do you have any visitors? Do you see any Americans or British soldiers? Any underground? We did not know anything. So, but it was harassment at night.
So we have one more picture and story that I'd like to finish with. And this is about Mr. DeMarcan getting presented with a very special honor. So if you could tell that story about the medal that you received. I don't remember hearing that today. And so
That's bragging.
That's okay. You deserve
we
it.
would love to hear it. Are you okay?
Slowly but surely. When I got into Fort Dix, the very first day, the Major General commanding the 9th Infantry, I'll never forget the word that he used, in fact. He said, I have in front of me 7,650 men, and one of them will be chosen as the one who has done the best. And I stupidly imagined, not knowing English, said, I want that. That will give me an opportunity maybe to get to France and get to see my fiancée. So granted, I worked my butt off. And so one day, this was on the 7th, that's what I entered Fort Dix on the 7th night. So this was on the 8th of December, 53. Now, come April the 23rd, 54, we never really, the lieutenant never addressed us. He was there. He was admirable. In fact, he had been injured in combat in Bastogne. He was limping. He never used his jeep. He always ran with us. He was a really outstanding soldier. And he stood there and he shouted, "The Marken, front and center." What my name? I don't know. So I salute, I introduced myself. He said, "You're in combat uniform. Get back in the barracks and put your OD uniform." That's a parade uniform. And the general is waiting for you. And on the double in the army means you must run at all times. So I ran, changed, got to the general's office, and the general looked at me and says, "Soldier, I'd like to know why you worked so hard during the last 5 months." I said, "Well, my father was selling armored organs in France and all over Europe, and I drove because he had difficulty driving. And I saw that the Americans were not treated very well by the French in France. So I think, knowing French fluently, I should be able to help." And he looked at me and said, "That is a very good reason." "And what is the other reason?" I said, "Well, that's very personal. I have a fiancée, a girl that I would like to marry one day. She's in Belgium, and there are no American troops in Belgium. So if I can get into France, maybe during a 3-day pass, I could hit." And he looked at me with a big smile. "Those are two very good reasons why." And he signed France. And then the army, like always, the army takes pictures, and the general. So that picture is showing the general, just as he's telling me that he's going to send me to France. So I am really bragging. I shouldn't, because I never fought. There's a gentleman that should be praised and thanked, because thanks to men like him who liberated us. If it is not for Mr. Country, I would not be here.
And the story about the medal, where the Major General or the Supreme...
Oh, I think that one, I showed it already, right?
No.
I don't think so. Did you?
No.
I don't think
Oh.
so. Yeah.
Tell us.
That's bragging again, I shouldn't. I took many times American veterans, like this gentleman, back to Belgium. But I was, since I know French fluently, they thought I was Belgian, and I was the driver. So I was always treated like a driver. They would be in the main rooms in the hotel, and I would be under the eaves with the drivers. And so one day we had a big American cemetery of Henri Chapelle, where in World War II. And it was a big ceremony for veterans, and I had 2 veterans with me. So, and all of a sudden, and the Belgian told me, well, we have about 3,500 people here for this ceremony. And I saw 3 helicopters coming from Germany. I said, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what's happening. Then one helicopter came down quickly, and out of the helicopter you could see men shooting out every direction. And you could see they were radio, but then one of them came not real close, but close enough that I could see he had a Uzi, that's an Israeli submachine gun hidden underneath his jacket. And he had a radio, and looking all the time everywhere. You could see they were talking to one another. There would be a big shot. Well, and the second helicopter came down, and I could see from far away everybody saluting, but you could not see and all right. So it didn't take me too long, and I found out it was the supreme commander of all the American troops and European troops in NATO coming from, it was many, after Eisenhower there was another one, and this General Cracker was at that time 4-star general. So now it comes the evening, it was dark, they were having a big room, and the general was going to introduce himself to the veterans. And they said to me, well, you're the driver of the veterans. And they frisked me. I went in there. But I was with the Belgians. I was not with the veterans. And now the general comes by and he shakes hands with everybody. And as he's shaking hands, and I did not know, of course, I land with this in my hand. And you can see 4-star general. What is this? Well, come to find out that the generals in the US Army like to design a coin to their liking, and they pass on the coin to one another. But then for a low-level pilot like me, it would be quite an honor to get. And I landed with this, but I did not know anything about it. So I leaned over towards the FBI guy that was behind him with the Uzi, and I said, sir, what is this? And he looked at me, and he whispered, aren't you Mr. DeMarco? Now, this is a mystery. Now, how come this FBI guy that I had never met, never saw, and he said, aren't you Mr. DeMarco? I said, yes, sir. Oh, you're on the general's radar. Oh, what? The general knows all the work we've done in the States and in Europe for the American veterans. And that's a way to say thank you. You imagine how priceless that has become now to me. But I am bragging, and I shouldn't be bragging.
No, you
This general is bragging. All yours.
Thank you.
I talk too much.
No.
Thank you.
During the war, I got drafted into the Army. I got a letter when I was 17 years old to go have a physical in Boston. I was just a kid. I used to pick dumps and everything. That's what I did. So the first time I went to Boston, I never rode a train in my life. I never was in front of anybody in my life. They rejected me. I was too scared. I come running home, Mom, they don't want me, they don't want me. Then after a few weeks, they called me in again. Now I'm a little used to it. And I go on an officer, he wants to know where to send you. Then I made a huge mistake. He says, do you like guns? I says, yes, I like guns. He knew just where to send me. The reason I like guns, I had a 22 when I was 14 years old. You had to be 16 to buy it, right? And I kept it underneath my bed upstairs. And the next door lady next door, feeding her asparagus with a ladle and water. She'd come down, she'd come all the way up, then she'd go back up, put the ladle on the barn door. She'd go in the house, I'm over there with curly eyes watching it. She goes in, I'm shooting at the ladle. Inside the barn, there's a 1936 Chevrolet car in there. And we're going right through it, made dents in all the doors. Then we used to go down to the brook and shoot the 22. And my friend was named Eddie Wilson. His father was a policeman in Milton. He's supposed to have a good shot, you know. He used to be jealous of me. I put a penny on the thing there, I shoot that, then I take a wooden match. They didn't have cardboard matches. I shoot it, light it. Then he got jealous, you know. We put all the guns in the kip. And then when we went back in, I couldn't hit nothing. You know what he did? Took the sights and he knocked it over. Yeah. Then I straightened it out and it was all right, you know. But the reason he didn't have a good shot is they used to give him 25 cents a week for allowance. I didn't get nothing, you know. So then when I went in the Army, the officer sent me to Fort Knox, Kentucky to train on a tank. I didn't know what it was all about. And General Patton wanted a tank battalion to fight for his armies. We were called the Black Cat Tank Battalion. You know? So then, one day they said, we're going to travel 50 miles outside of the base. We traveled 50 miles out. Then they said, have the captain put the soldier on a tank number 6 to commence firing. I hit every target. They pulled a plane out of the woods, way up high. I blew that one out. And they said, cease firing. Have the captain bring the soldier to the grandstand. I goes to the grandstand. They're all looking at me. And he says to me, he don't even shave yet. Because that was him firing a gun. They said, we never seen anything like it. He is now a corporal and he's a sharpshooter. But that's bad for me. Now this Sergeant Vecchio, he was from Morgantown, West Virginia. He's training on a tank. And he took training in the desert and everything. Guess who he wanted in his tank? Me. So I went in his tank. He was from Morgantown, West Virginia. Yeah. And then we went to England. We stayed there a week. And they had dances for the GIs. Put your left foot in and then all of a sudden, an officer comes. All the men from the tank battalion report their quarters. I went to the quarters. And then we went by boat. They say a German sub was chased, falling us or something. And we landed at Utah Beach right after the invasion. And I remember being in the tank, and all of a sudden it says, platoon adjust, tank number 6. Shell HE, charge 5, fuse quick, base deflection, 150, quarter, 321, fire one ready. I fire one round, he says, up 10. I go up 10, cease firing, machine gun nest. 2 rounds, I knocked it out.
Wow.
That was good, you know.
Yeah.
And then one day, we was in Utah Beach, and this officer says to my sergeant, go down this road. And he says to the officer, I'm not going down here, suicide. He refused an order. And the officer said, okay, we'll send somebody else down. We went to the next road, and I'm shooting the 30 caliber, 30 inches off the thing there. All of a sudden, he sent another tank down there. We heard another thing on the radio, get out, get out. The tank got knocked out, just like that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, then we were the first separate tank across the Ludendorff Bridge. You ever hear of that? He knows, yeah. And I remember being buttoned up, we were right aside of there, and there's some prisoners, American soldiers coming this way, all bandaged up, and another one all going in. After they went in, we buttoned up the tank, and I started going across, and I was nervous, I was scared, the bridge was going like that. When I looked down there, there's all bodies down, floating down, and right up the way, the Americans are building another portable bridge or something. But we went across. Then, you know what my sergeant did? We was in the 105, you know, we had a trailer. He took some ammunition out, and there was a liquor store there. He put a lot of liquor in there. But he used to give it to the officers so they don't send us in harm's way. That's what he did. Yeah. They're talking about the Battle of the Bulge. I remember I was firing into the next town, round after round. All of a sudden, another officer comes. Come on, we're moving out. We traveled 50 miles outside, someplace in Belgium, and we're going down the hill like this, and that officer said, go up this road. We're going up the road, there's all dead Americans and American soldiers and Germans all over. We had to run over their legs with the tank. Well, yeah, we were right up over the tank. And you know what they had there? Trenches like in World War I. Yeah, it's a small town. And we stayed right up on the hill. And we're sleeping in the tank. All of a sudden, I see the shells coming from Aachen, the next town. We went up over the tank. I kicked the driver, said, back the tank up, back the tank up. He backed the tank up. The next round was 4 feet off the ground. When I went in that trench, though, I see the German P-38 there. Because I'm only like 19 years old looking for stuff. A real P-38 in the trench. I took it, I put it in the tank, and then the sergeant said, we'll have some 10-in-1 rations, we have something to eat, you know. I didn't have no place to put my mess kit, and there's a house there with a windowsill. I put it up there, there's a dead German on the bottom. I stood on his back, I started eating. I looked down, he had the holster for them. He was shot, you know. So I stopped eating, I fished his pocket, and he was just married. I took the picture and I kept it. I took the holster, all blood on it, I put it in the tank, I'm scraping it. And my sergeant said, what do you got now? I said, so I got this in. He said, no, you don't bother with it, you know. But I got the holster, but I got that P-38 too. But I felt bad for that soldier. He was young, the picture, they were holding swords up, he just got married, you know. I don't know what my friend tried to find out about those trenches. They were all over with dead Germans and Americans, all over the place. I can't believe it right now, all over. Americans, and that's the Battle of the Bulge. Dead Americans and dead soldiers, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, all over the place. I remember that place. But when I got out of there, then one day, I'd like to tell this story. One day I'm firing a gun in the tobacco field. You know, they have the tobacco fields in Connecticut? I'm firing in them. I'm always firing like hundreds and hundreds of rounds. That's why my ears are still ringing out. And then an officer comes out. They want to be first, you know, all the time. He says, come on. Well, we try to pull up. The tank was right up over, the mud was right up over the track. We couldn't move. I'm happy. That officer wants us to go up to the front again. They want to be first. He said, leave the tank here, you and the sergeant. He said, we'll set up a tank retriever. They left. Once in a while, there's some shells going over. I didn't mind. I went to the barn. There's a black sedan in there. See, I'm seeing this here right now. It was booby trap. Then there was a little red convertible. I went over to that, I started it up, I hit a 4x4 post with the back fender. It was made out of plywood with like suitcase stuff all over the car. Yeah. So I drove it out. Once in a while shells are going over. I pulled out. I says to the sergeant, let's take a ride. He says, okay, there's nobody around, right? I said, where do I change my uniform? I kept my good clothes in it, with my patch and everything. I took a gun, I put a hand grenade on it, pistol in my back pocket. I said, let's go. We start going. I see the big stone wall. We drove through there. There's all these Germans eating at these tables. Honest to God, all over the place. I still have my rifle and everything. And I said to the sergeant, there's some nice girls, I think I'll grab them. I drive up, says, you get in the car. She got in the car. The sergeant says, I want one too. There's no lie. She got in the car, you know. We still took a chance going in there with all those people. They're all Germans in it. Then I went underneath the tree. I tried to embrace it. They were shivering like, you know, when you catch a rabbit? They were. His was shivering too. They're talking German. I said, let's take him back. I said, this dude's scared. I said, I don't know why. He says, you don't. He said, you got the rifle with a hand grenade hanger, you got a pistol in the back. He said, all right, let's take him back. We start taking him back. All of a sudden, I see an infantry jeep coming with the green flag. He goes, oh, pull over there. We pulled over. Where you going with this girl? We told him. And then he looked up my pack. He said, we heard about you tankers. I'll take the girl back. But this is what got that officer mad. See, they want to be first all the time, you know? He says to me, where's your outfit? I said, they left 2 days ago, sir. Did he get mad? Then he says, name, rank, and serial number. He wrote everything down. Then I'm sitting in my tank a week later. All of a sudden, an officer comes over. Corporal, you and the sergeant are battle fatigue. You're going to Brussels, Belgium for a vacation. Beautiful, right? Got all the stuff right. We went to Brussels, stayed in a gigantic hotel. Then I step outside. There's a lot of GIs there. I see the GI. I said, where can I get a girl? He says, go up here on the second floor. I said, how much they charge? $20 a pack of cigarettes or a pair of silk stockings. I goes up there, and I'm making arrangements, because I didn't smoke, you know. I'm making arrangements. All of a sudden, I look out the window. There's the MPs coming up there. You can't do that in Belgium. In France, you can. You know. And he come up there, he looked in there, he didn't see anybody, then he left. I left the girl there and everything. I went back to my hotel. All of a sudden, there's all the people, all the GIs there. Another officer comes, hey, what? Everybody stands at attention. Another officer comes out, be seated. They all sat down. And this is what the officer says. Men, you are American soldier in a foreign land. The world's are upon you. Remember, you're an American soldier. Act like one, just like that. Be seated. Everybody sits down. Another officer comes out. Men, we are gathered here, 2 American soldiers fraternizing with the German enemy, misbehavior in the front lines, riding around in a German vehicle. They will be court-martialed. They are Alpha Consiglia of the 774 Black Cat Tank Battalion and the sergeant too. Now I'm happy, right? I had to dig a trench, I didn't get paid. I'm happy, they're gonna bust me, right? I go to the captain. I said, Captain, now that I'm busted, I said, I don't have to be in the tank anymore. You know what he said? No, they heard about you, you're going right back in. Then I had a lot of close calls. One time we pulled into town, and oh yeah, beet field. We're in a beet field, firing into the next town, you know. All of a sudden, officers, they can stay in the building, you know. He must have been an ROTC officer. He was in the next building. He comes out, he says, He says, Corporal, we got fired at last night. He says, near the house where I'm sleeping. I says, yes, I know who's doing it. I said, want me to take him on with the 50 caliber? Oh, I never heard of this word. He says, no, that's unethical. Yeah, that's what he said. Okay. The next time it was at the foundation of the house. He come over, what at the foundation of the house? I says, yes, sir, want me to take him on? He says, okay. He was a mile away. I goes up on the terrace, see, I just barely could pull the thing back. I was supposed to be a sharpshooter. If you use the sight, you never get them. I just went by the dust in the field there, the beef field, and went dum, right up on him, and then he went over. And then at that time too, there was a German airplane we were all shooting at them with the 50 caliber. I don't know what the plane was doing there. We were all shooting at him, and then he landed right in front of it and he burst at the plane. It was like suicide. I don't know, he was trying to get away or nothing, you know. Then another time, we pulled in this here town, must have pulled in there too quick. I don't want to sleep in the tank, so I said, I'm going to go in the barn and sleep with the cows, you know. And I said, you guys guard the tank. I goes in there, I'm sleeping. All of a sudden I hear some noise come down in the morning, like, you know. And here's this infantry coming down with his gun out, had 2 German prisoners. He says, hey, you tankers, look what we found upstairs sleeping with you. Yeah. You know, he said they had burp guns still. But those were the good ones, you know. Yeah. Then when the war ended, I had to guard all these prisoners. And one day I lined up a platoon, a whole platoon of them. They were chopping branches down. And one of the prisoners says, "Shot Americano soldat with the machine gun here. He wouldn't know how to use it." He says, "Look at that American soldier with that machine gun." Because I look so young, you know. He said he wouldn't know how to use it. They all went down there and I fired the guns over the top of the road. They all went down, you know. An officer come running down and he said to me, "What happened?" I told him. He says, "All right, be careful, walk with." When they come up, he saluted me and everything. Heinz, fly, fear. You know, I lined them all up and I took them away, you know. They did a lot of crazy things. Then when I was in Luxembourg, that's where General Patton's buried, you know. Yeah, with his men. I was in Luxembourg. I see this big wooden box. That could have been boobies. I goes in there and opens it, and it says, "Achtung, how to put this bazooka together," you know, in German. But then it had pictures how to put it together too. I put it on my shoulder, and I'm looking at the pictures. I press the trigger and blew all the woods up. An officer comes running down, he says, "All right, be careful." He just, instead of him telling me, that could have been booby trapped, you know? Yeah, geez. But that's the way it was, you know. Then, like I had 7 brothers in the service. All of us were in World War II at the same time. They never talked about the service. They all passed away. And the last one just passed away in March. He was, I'm the only one left out of 9 of them. 9 brothers. I'm all alone now. Yeah. Oh yeah, when we went to England with our tank, I was sleeping in the boat. An officer come, I said, "What are you waking me up for?" He said, "You gotta go guard the tank." I says, "This is our tank, what are we gonna guard it for?" They wanted you to guard that tank all the time. So you just barely could get in there, you know? And then an officer comes over, make sure you're not sleeping. I didn't like that. Yeah, geez.
Yeah, right now I'm working on all my uncles and my dad's journals. So I go to all the museums and events. And I was in the town committee years back for the Veterans Memorial Soldiers Committee. And then I also did the Community Emergency Response Team in town. And I was at the Recreation committee also. So I meet these fellows at the events, and Mr. Consigli, because of Mr. Damachin, he just received his French Legion Medal of Honor at the American Heritage Museum. Mr. Consigli was also in the tank division. My father was in the 5th Armored, 46th Armored Company A, 46th Armored Infantry Company A Division, and he was a corporal, and he ended up getting the Purple Heart. And his brother, Donald Du Bois, was in the Army Air Corps from Worcester, they're from. And their last name is Du Bois. So when my father was in France, he would, he'd be speaking French, and the French are looking at him like, how do you know French? So one time they told him where there was a wine cellar, so in French, so he went and hid, and he was missing in action for a couple of days. He was hiding in the wine cellar. And then at the same time, my Uncle Donald was with Jimmy Stewart. Uncle Donald was in the Army Air Corps, and Jimmy Stewart, the movie star, was his commander. And he was flying, they were flying over France, and I guess they were flying low. And I don't know if they were dropping off goods, you know, to the French people or the French underground. Well, Uncle Donald's plane got shot down over France, and the whole plane was demolished. He was the sole survivor, and he parachuted into a tree in France, and they told us it was just starting to get dark. So he's hanging in this tree with his parachute. It was all tangled up, and the French underground saw him. And I think because he spoke French too, you know, he had extra help. But anyways, they cut him down, and they hit him for a couple days. And then after that, what they did, he got all banged up, he told us, from the branches. They brought him into a hospital in France, because I guess the Germans were already pushed out of France. So when he went to the hospital in France, they said, oh, we have another fellow here, Roland Dubois, that's my father. And they couldn't believe it. They're both from Worcester, and they are in France. So my father told me, and I have a newspaper clipping, he was wounded in Luxembourg, and he told us he was walking alongside of the tanks in Luxembourg September 10th, 1944, and he slipped into a hole, and the tank went over his foot. So he had injured his foot, he didn't break it or anything. So he was in the hospital with an injured foot for a week or two, and here shows up my Uncle Donald, who came flying out of the sky, and they couldn't believe it, you know. And so they talked about that for years. And then I was always curious. I would ask them how they slept in the snow and the cold and things like that. And another uncle, my uncle Alphonse Leboeuf, he was in the, the Army Engineer Division, and he would tell me, he said, oh yeah, we'd cut down branches from the pine trees, and we'd lay them on top of the snow, because they didn't have enough time to dig, you know, any foxholes. So and my father would tell us too, they'd lay right on top of the snow in sleeping bags. And then my uncle Alphonse told me a story. One time he was in the woods, I don't know if it was Belgium or whatever, so he had he told me he put a hatchet to a tree, and it was in the morning, and he's going to shave. He put a mirror on the hatchet, so he's standing there shaving, you know, and all of a sudden, choo, the reflection from the mirror, choo, so he ducked down, and he's a pretty tall guy, and he just almost didn't make that then. And then I want to show you, we just got my father's coat. So all these years, we just found my father's uniforms and everything, and all these years, Dave's had the coat. And he remembered he had it. So he gave it back to us. We just got it like a year ago. And it's real heavy, because I'm like, how did those guys stay warm? You know? And I noticed the belt's missing in the back. I don't know why they would cut the belt or whatever. But this is actually what he wore in the snow. And it's so heavy, I'm exhausted holding it. So I always ask people, you know, where they slept, if they could light a fire. And one fellow told me too, they did give them a can of Sterno, but you had to be way, way back from the enemy line to light that. And some other fellows told me that one time it was so cold they were driving in the Jeep truck. It didn't have a canvas covering, so they knocked on the window and they said to the driver, pull over to that farm. And soldiers got out into the farm, and the soldier told me, he said he was so cold, they went into the farm and they laid right on top of the cows to heat up. And they all slept with the cows for the night, you know, they hung in the farm. So the reason why I'm always concerned about the cold, how these guys, because my father would tell me, he'd say, oh, I got trench foot, you know. Well, I have my mother's family, my father's family speaks French, they're from Canada, so I grew up there speaking French, blah, blah, blah. And then my mother's family, they actually, my grandparents escaped the Russian soldiers in 1925. And my grandmother said the Russian soldiers were worse than the German soldiers. They'd actually be working in the farms as peasants, and they'd just come right into their property, the Russian soldiers, and my grandmother would hide in the barns with my uncles, you know, because after a while the Germans came and they were looking for the Aryans, the blonde, blue-eyed boys, so she'd have to hide my uncle, she'd say, in the hay in the barn. And she said she was holding my uncle so close that she almost suffocated him because he started to cry. So they eventually escaped from there, and they got into they went at nighttime and they got into a milk wagon driven by the horses, and they taped my Uncle Tony's mouth shut, they told me. My Uncle Tony's my godfather, and he was also in World War II in the third half-track division I'm doing, each one's your. So they taped Uncle Tony's mouth shut, he was like 1 1/2, and my Uncle Louis was like about 5. And then they covered them up with the blankets, and they, I'm trying to think, how did they get over to the ship? So I just found out from some older cousins of mine, they got over to a riverboat in Vilnius, Lithuania. They got into the riverboat, and it must have went up through Poland, where they went out and caught the ships to Ellis Island. She said it took them 2 weeks to get to Ellis Island. Well, in the meantime, my grandmother's brother, Joseph Zinkovich, who was in Lithuania also, because I have relatives in Lithuania, we've never met because when the Russians, Germans came, everybody went and hid, you know, or a lot of people went to the next couple towns over. So my great uncle, Joseph Zinkovich, we have pictures of him. He's got a uniform on and he's on these horses, and he was a police officer. So he would see when the Russian soldiers were coming, so he'd probably gallop over to my grandparents and say, "Oh, hide, here comes the soldiers." So later on at the beginning, so he never left the country, but later on at the beginning of World War II, the Russian soldiers put a lot of Lithuanians from Vilnius into the cattle cars, and they brought him, he was placed in a cattle car, and he was brought up to Siberia, to the concentration camps. So every winter now, I think of these fellows, you know, that were in poor living conditions or in concentration camps. I get that, it's called compassion fatigue. I'm like reliving what these fellows went through, you know, no cold, walking through with all this equipment, they're shooting at you, bombs are, you know, flying. So So that's why I hang with these fellows, because these guys keep me strong and stable, because I work in the medical field for over 40 years. So I work in ER with trauma. Well, I work rehab now, but I see what these soldiers and people seen for 40 years right here in Worcester. So that's why I like to go to all the history events and
Thank
all
you.
that. Yeah, and then we had a Nazi flag too. One time, my father would say to me, he'd say, Marie, come here. I'd say, what, Dad? He'd say, get the hell out of here. Here comes the Krauts. So I was always a fast runner, and I still am. I'm like, shh, run. So one time, and we'd hide. Remember years ago in the junior and the first grade, we'd have like air raid shelter, and they'd have the alarm, and we'd all have to go underneath the desks or downstairs in the cellar of the school. So I was hiding in my cellar one time playing air raid shelter, because I'd actually play army outside. I'd get on the ground and we'd, crawl like that. So I guess in this big box, it was a washing machine box, because when he shows the flags here, I remember this, I'm in the box and I find this huge Nazi flag. And I'm about 5.5, 6 years old. And so I take it outside and I'm running with it in my backyard in North Grafton here. I live over near the North Grafton post office growing up. So I'm running in the backyard like Superman with it all over. And my sister's out there, and she said we even put it on the ground and we were laying on it getting a tan. And my mother, whose mother and father escaped the Russian soldiers, because they're telling us these stories, my mother sees it, she comes, grabs it and pulls it from her. She says, if anybody sees you, they're gonna be, they're gonna bomb us and stuff like that. So my sister said they put it in the rag bag, and my mother says, yeah, we burnt it because they were afraid. So I wish I would have had the Nazi flag, but now we've got the United States flag because my father, passed away. We have it in a nice, box there. So.